think so. Is that all right, Katie?
I see. I just
we're good.
The pop-up. Okay, I will admit everyone.
Welcome, folks. We will be getting started in just a couple minutes. Welcome, everybody. Come on in. We're going to ask you to mute yourself if you're not speaking. We did just put a link in the chat box for the Facebook Live page as well. If you have any Zoom connectivity issues, you can switch over to Facebook Live. You might even share that with your friends and try to get your neighbors into listening to this as well. So welcome, and we'll get started right around 7 o'clock. Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started right at 7 o'clock. Get comfortable. Just keep your microphone on mute. We'll be starting shortly. All right. And with that, we'll go ahead and we're going to just jump right in and try and keep on a schedule tonight. Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. We are excited for this evening. So we are welcoming people from all over the Chesapeake and beyond. We've got some folks registered from Florida and California. So welcome, everybody. I'm Jody Rose. I'm the Executive Director of Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake. We are one of the co-sponsors of this event tonight, along with Max, the Multi-Faith Alliance of Climate Stewards of Frederick County. IPC, Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake, has worked with over 350 congregations to engage them in Chesapeake watershed education and restoration activities. Congregations play an important role in restoring the watershed, from educating their members to installing rain gardens to thinking differently about how they manage their grounds. We are all forming faithful stewards who care for sacred waters. To learn more about IPC and get involved, you can visit our website at www.interfaithchesapeake.org. We are recording this event and we're broadcasting live on Facebook. We will be sending around the recording to those who registered online a few days after the event. We will only be recording the speakers who are spotlighted, but if you're uncomfortable or worried about being recorded, you can always just keep your video off. If you already unsubscribed from our emails, unfortunately, you won't receive the recording. You can always resubscribe by going to our Stay Connected page and re-signing up for our emails. And Natalie's going to put that Stay Connected page in the chat box in case you think you may have unsubscribed. You can sign back in and be sure to get the recording. We also just want to give a big thank you to all the municipalities, the foundations, the businesses, and donors who supported this event tonight. The major donors were listed on the welcome slide as you were entering the room tonight. So big, huge thanks to them. And now I just want to turn it over to Bernadette to introduce Max. Bernadette?
Thanks so much, Jody. Hi, everybody. The mission of the Multi-Faith Alliance of Climate Stewards, or Max Frederick, is to act locally on our moral duty to future generations by protecting the earth and its inhabitants from harmful impacts of climate change. Our membership includes a diverse group of faith traditions, and we all agree on our moral obligation to care for creation. Our actions range from pushing shovels in the ground, advocating for environmental legislation, and producing webinars such as this one. In our first webinar in the series, we had Doug Tallamy explain why we need to make our backyards more wildlife friendly. And then we had Carrie Wickstead explain how to do that in our region, explaining which plants to plant where and why. Tonight, we continue that series with IPC with Paul Tukey, explaining how to care for our beloved lawns in a way that does not harm other creatures or our neighbors. We welcome you to join Max Frederick using our email, which we will put in the chat. And back to Jody, thanks.
Thanks, Bernadette. All right, so just to give you a little roadmap for tonight, we're going to start off with a few words from Professor James Hatley of Salisbury University. Then we're going to turn it over to Paul Tukey. He'll speak for about 45 minutes, and we have 15 minutes set aside for Q&A at that time. Is there an echo? Can we turn off that mute? Okay. During the Q&A or at any point, if you would like to ask questions in your chat box, you can direct those to myself, Jody, or Matt, or really anybody that you can see in the chat box. But Matt and I are really handling all of the questions. So feel free to please direct those to us. After the Q&A session, Max and IPC have some action items that we are going to offer you and walk through a little bit of an activity kit and talk about some of, some regulatory things that are happening in this space. And then we're going to close it out with a reflection from Reverend Beth O'Malley of Hood College. So that's your roadmap for the night. Like I said earlier at the beginning, if you have any Zoom connectivity issues, you can hop over to the Facebook page where we're live streaming as well. So with that, I want to introduce Professor Hatley. James Hatley is an emeritus professor in philosophy and environmental studies at Salisbury University in Maryland. Although he's retired, he continues to offer courses there, including one this coming spring in contemplative ecology. He is currently a member of the Har Shalom congregation in Missoula, Montana, and we're just really excited to have him. So welcome, James, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And as requested, I'll begin with a land recognition. As we gather today, we wish to hold space for silent reflection and gratitude for land upon which we live and the local waters that support and nourish all of creation. We recognize that this land and these waters were stewarded by many who came before. For tens of thousands of years, the Lenape, Nanticoke, Piscataway, Choptank, Chickahominy, Mattaponi, Monacan, Nazimond, Pamunkey, Rappahannock, Cheronanka, Nottoway, Potawatomi, Accohonic, Assateague, Nosy-Wawash, Pocomoke, and Wikwamicus stewarded this land and called it home. The original people believed that they belonged to these lands and waters and not the other way around. Their spirituality and identity were place-based. The stories these indigenous peoples, plants, animals, lands, and rivers witnessed are filled with environmental, social, and climate changes, interwoven with stories of many struggles, injustices, and resilience. So begin my introductory remarks. Blessed be grass, for the grasses in their many varieties indeed invite our blessing. Indeed, if we are listening, our lawns, it turns out, might be inviting us to embark upon a path of blessing, on a more expansive way of living out our involvement, not only on our own personal home ground, but also on the home grounds of all other living things. Might we be struck with wonder by the grass? Might we be moved to affection for it, an affection that takes us deeper and yet again deeper into the way in which grass might reframe the very way in which we see our world. So much of the American institution of the lawn, as I had come to understand it in my childhood, was about control. Armed with a patented weed stick, the very newest newfangled modern contraption for home lawn care, each Saturday in summer, I regularly daubed with neat white dollops of poison, the dandelions rudely messing up the green expanse of our yard with their loud yellow blossoms and their even more bothersome ripened seed heads. What we wanted from the lawn was a space designed for free play of our footsteps, a level playing field for whatever game or leisure or business we might embark upon. We wanted, in short, a resilient outdoor carpet on which to play out unimpeded our all too human projects. For the birds, we left a few trees here and there, or perhaps a hedge. But the lawn was the space that mattered, the space that made a yard a yard. We knew then what we wanted from the grass, but we didn't stop to think much about what the grass might have been offering in its own right to us. If we thought of grass at all, it was perhaps in the mode of Walt Whitman, as undifferentiated blades of growth, each as unremarkable as the next. As Richard Manning puts it, by grass, by the way, Richard Manning's the author of a wonderful book called Grasslands that I highly recommend. By grass, Whitman meant democracy, gentle and uniform, which is to say undifferentiated fingers of human souls spreading across the earth like a lawn. Lawn is a pretty powerful concept when you start thinking of the whole country as being thought of as a lawn. On land thought of as a lawn, which is to say as a blank slate, America was called upon to write a binding contract with creation. But what we purveyors of the lawn have needed to learn is that the grasses were not an all-purpose repurposer for land understood as a blank slate upon which we were going to write whatever we chose. Rather, grass serves as a fountainhead of energy, a source of blessing for all with which grass shares land. Grass, if we listen, has something to say in its own voice. In the Jewish practice of blessing, one is called upon to take a moment, even a minute, for respite. One delays one's consuming of the world so that, as one rabbi puts it, something other than thoughtless appropriation can unfold. This pause, however, is more than a stutter step, more than a quick bit of business to get through so that we can then get down to the so-called real business. In the very invocation of blessing, leave is given for the energies of creation to flow forth, and in doing so to make a difference, not only for now, but also forever after. Indeed, the rabbis have noted that the Hebrew word for blessing, bracha, resonates with that for fountain or pool, brecha. Blessing then causes shefa, the abundant flow of the Creator's love and goodness to pour into the world. But be forewarned, once blessing is offered and acknowledged, the faucet is not going to turn off. Our very manner of going about our business will find itself dramatically altered. In the very first creation story of the Hebrew Bible, and it is helpful to remember there are many of these scattered throughout the scriptures, grass is the very first living kind to make an appearance. To be more precise, the Hebrew word deshay, naming the living thing that appears at this moment on creation's third day, is sometimes translated as grass, but perhaps is better understood as sprout. So when the Most High says, let the earth put forth grass, the Hebrew goes, V'yomer Elohim tadashe haaretz dashe. So tadashe haaretz dashe, calls forth from the earth déchet, grass. One wonderful aspect of this formulation is that the verb tadashe, translated as putting forth, is in actuality based on the same root as déchet, namely the sprouts, and by analogy, the grasses that are being put forth. So playing with these meanings, one can hear through the Hebrew that the earth is called upon to sprout forth with sprouts. God is not just grass is not just a thing to be manipulated here, but is active in its own right. To put it in another way, the grass grasses creation. The grass grasses the earth. Rashi, a famous medieval commentator on the Torah, writes that one should understand this verse as, let it, the earth, be filled and covered with a garment of different grasses. This leads then to a question. What occurs in our relationship to the land in which we are living if we think of our lawns not as blank slates, but as a garment actively sprouting in greenery, a greenery that clothes the earth with blessings of vegetative life in its many varieties? Spiffing up the earth, it turns out, would involve grassing it up. Well, not all the possible spiffing up of life involved is in this biblical moment. For in this particular story of creation, the trees with all the varieties of fruit come right after. Forests too are involved in clothing the earth with blessing. Indeed, the Most High goes on to plant a forest for Adam and Eve filled with fruit-bearing trees. But for just a moment, let's think about the grasses and all the splendor that lies in them. As it turns out, I grew up in a landscape, the high plains of Mountain West, that once was clothed in an entire world of grass. Now over 94% of it has been wiped out. We Montanans are fond of saying that we live in God's country, as if in at least this particular place on the planet, the immensity and power, not to say the righteousness of what is involved in his creation, were still undeniably in evidence. But one discovers, if one looks on this place with an eye that is ecologically oriented and historically attuned, that the gloriousness of it writ large festers with wounds in its every nook and cranny. A well cared for plot of grassland these days, that would be well cared for, might have 40 different species of plants. Whereas before the prairie was plowed up for wheat and grazed over by cattle, over 200 would have been found in that same place. As Benji Jones observes, researchers found that natural grasslands, loosely defined as open ecosystems with low-lying vegetation and few trees, harbor a similar number of vertebrate species like birds and mammals as do forests. And unlike the grassy sward that is the American lawn, which is doused with some 3 trillion gallons of water yearly, the prairie, in conditions too arid for trees, sustained its abundance with only the help of the weather and the natural flow of watersheds. That alone makes it a blessing. But perhaps what is most striking about the grasses is how they co-evolved with ungulates so that grass blades can be chewed upon at their tips, even as they grow yet more nutritious vegetation below from their base. Perhaps I'm pushing the analogy a bit too far, but it seems to me that in their peculiar manner of growth, the many varieties of grass serve as a telling exemplar of the generous surging upward of life that constitutes the very meaning of blessing in a Hebraic context. And so let me end my remarks by repeating the very blessing with which they were begun. Blessed be grass, for the grasses in their many varieties indeed invite our blessing. Indeed, if we are listening, our lawns, it turns out, might become invitations to embarking upon a path of blessing, on a more expansive way of living out our involvement, not only on our own personal home ground, but also on the home grounds of all other living things. In answering this invitation, let us keep in mind the rabbinical admonition that anyone who derives pleasure from this world without a bracha, without a blessing, is stealing from God. Our lawns should be occasions for gratitude to, rather than thievery from the Most High. A serious work indeed.
Thank you very much, James.
So now we'll begin to the recording. And so Natalie, go ahead and we'll start recording this program. And it's my pleasure to introduce Paul Tukey to all of you. So Paul Tukey serves as Director of Environmental Stewardship for the Glenstone Museum in Potomac, Maryland, recognized for the outstanding beauty of its all-organic 300 acres, including native meadows, 5-acre organic lawn, and restored streams and tributaries. An award-winning writer as well, Paul has been featured in thousands of media outlets from Martha Stewart and Good Morning America to National Geographic and Reader's Digest. It's our great pleasure to introduce the person the New York Times calls the godfather of the natural land care movement, Paul Tukey.
Okay, can you hear me? Everybody hear me okay?
We can hear you. Yep.
All right.
We're going to spotlight you. All right, great.
All right. Well, thank you for that introduction. And James, that was wonderful. I could have listened to you all evening. I really, really appreciated those remarks and resonated with those remarks. It's a true pleasure to be here with the Interfaith Partners and all of the various sponsors and other organizations. Kudos to the organizers. We started talking about this many, many months ago. We had many, many meetings, and I've been doing this kind of work for more than a quarter century. A little bit about my story is that I was a journalist, and I covered the Red Sox, Celtics, Patriots, Bruins. I don't mean to alienate anybody right off the start with that, but I'm from Maine, so I'm genetically predisposed to root for those teams. And I grew up on a dairy farm. You're going to hear about that. I actually, after my newspaper career ended at the ripe old age of 29, they were offering a buyout. They wanted to close the afternoon paper, and they wanted to get rid of employees. And they said, you could have 3 weeks pay for every year that you've worked here. And I said, great. What's the minimum age of retirement? And they ever laughed at me, being 29 years old, but there was no minimum age. So I bought myself a pickup truck and a lawnmower with my retirement from the newspaper and declared myself to be a landscaping professional. Basically, all I knew how to do was walk in a straight line behind the lawnmower to manicure those perfect little patches of green that James was just talking about. I was kind of like Forrest Gump in the movie. If you saw them, and he's driving along in the red snapper, and he's going back and forth with his beautiful straight lines. Well, that was me. And then people would say, what are you going to do about my dandelions? And I said, well, my grandmother will come down and she'll dig them up and eat them for you, because that wasn't very sustainable. And my grandmother, of course, lived a long ways away at that point. So you're going to hear about my grandmother tonight. You're going to hear a little bit about my journey through this, but ultimately I wound up very, very ill in the hospital from using all of the products that I was putting on people's properties to kill all those dandelions. Things like turf builder and weed and feed and Roundup. I was getting blurred vision and nosebleeds and diarrhea and vomiting. It was terrible. And after about the 6th doctor I'd gone to, he said, you know, he looked at the back of the bag, and all of the bags have the same thing: caution, warning, or danger. Keep out of the reach of children. But yet I'm putting this all over people's lands. And he looked at the label and he said, you know, Mr. Tukey, if you keep using all that stuff, you're going to be dead. Thus began my journey, and it brings me here tonight, brought me to Glenstone. And with that, I am going to share my screen. We tested this earlier, so it should be working. And you let me know if you can see my screen. And okay. Okay, you should see my lead slide.
We are seeing your grid, Paul.
Okay, you're still seeing my grid. Okay, well, we're gonna try that again. We're gonna unshare. I apologize for that.
That's okay.
And we're gonna try it again. Technology, we'd much rather be doing this in person. I've done thousands of talks in person, and I'm not sure why that didn't work, but we're gonna try it again. How about now?
Yeah, so we are still seeing your grid. So I think what you want to do is, before you share, go ahead and start your slideshow.
Yep.
And then share and pick the view that is the one you want to.
I can't be on that and share because it blanks my whole screen. So we're gonna try it again. We will get there, I promise, one way or another. We will get there. Okay, you got my grid now. can you see it now? Are you seeing slides?
Not seeing your slide.
Still not seeing it. Okay.
Is this something you can,
You have to share your screen.
Yeah, no, I'm actually attempting to do that. And because we tried it earlier and it worked great, right? So
yeah, it worked just fine.
yeah. Can you see it now?
Yeah, we're still seeing the grid, but
Okay, let's try it again. How about now?
there, you got it.
Okay, all right. Well, fourth time's the charm. Okay, so as we said, I am from the Glenstone Museum, and this first slide is what we're going to get to tonight. Right, you're here to get some information that you can use this fall. Fall is the lawn care season. So this is the basic outline that we're going to get to. We're going to talk about the soil test and thinking of your soil as alive. We're going to talk about growing the right grass, how not all grass is created equally. I don't think lawns are bad. I think that playing badminton in a meadow is not all that great. It's not as much fun, or soccer or baseball. So it's really the way that we care for our lawns. Now, do we have our lawns too big sometimes? Yes, they are. We'll get there. We're going to talk about watering and mowing and synthetic materials and adding compost. We're going to talk about weeds as messengers sent by Mother Nature to tell us something about our soil. They're really just symptoms of underlying conditions. And similarly, we're going to talk about insects, and we're going to talk about overseeding. But first, I'm going to ask the question that I ask everybody in every talk. Who's been to Bradford, Maine? And since I can't see everybody, and most people are muted, I'm going to assume not too many people. But my grandparents, where I was raised on this dairy farm in Bradford, Maine, were Henry and Clarita Van Dyne. They were dairy farmers. And they grew all of the food for all of the friends and farm hands and family. And we had lots of people at the dinner table and breakfast table and lunch table, especially, every single day. And the only thing we had for fertilizer was cow manure. That's all we had. We didn't have turf builder or anything like that. We didn't even have Miracle Grow. And my grandmother her faith in those days manifested itself in a lot of different ways. And for quite a while, she was a practicing Pentecost, which meant at least in the 1960s, when I was growing up, that she had to wear a dress no matter what she was doing. And she was always busy. And sometimes she'd be going out haying the field with my grandfather, and she would have a dress and nylons on, tossing bales of hay up into the wagon. And she could be mucking out the cow manure behind the cows in the barn, and she would have a dress on. And she would wear this dress flitting about the kitchen. You see her there with her braided rug, and she's knitting. Those are homemade dresses. Well, she would wear those nylons until they were absolutely threadbare, right? She'd be flitting about, and she'd catch them, and she'd look down, and they'd be holes in the socks, and she'd say, "Oh, these old things," right? And she'd dribble them off right there in front of me and hand them to me. And I didn't like this job very much when I was a little boy, but I would take my grandmother's limp underwear out to the cow manure pile, and I would stuff the pantyhose full of composted cow manure. And what did I do then? I would bring it back to the house, and I would put it in the rain barrel. And every time I went in and out the door, I would swish those nylons full of cow manure in the 40-gallon rain barrel that my grandfather had put right next to the front steps. And after 7 to 10 days, my grandmother would say, "Can you say cow shit on this show without getting into trouble? We'll call it manure tea, cow shit tea, whatever vernacular you want to say." I don't mean to offend anybody, but that was the true story. And my grandmother would give me another job then. I would take the watering can, and she'd say, "You have to get the tops of the leaves and the bottom of the leaves, dear." And I'd say, "Grammy, why do I have to do this?" She's following me along. And she says, "Because the tea invites the good bugs in and keeps the bad bugs away." This is a woman with a 5th grade education from St. Agathe School in Aroostook County up in Maine. So we're going to go to the next slide. There's my grandfather and I with my brother. That's me in the foreground there. Now, we lived what my grandmother called the poop loop of life. Now, when you're on a dairy farm, a lot of people think your life is milking cows. And you do that in the morning, and you do that in the evening. But the rest of the day, you pretty much manage the manure. You take the manure out to the fields and you spread it. And it is the food that makes the growth possible. You grow food for the cattle, we grow food for us. And you're constantly gathering the food, and the cattle eat what grows in the field, and they digest it and excrete it the same way that we do, in the same way that the organisms in the soil do. And this is an important concept for this talk tonight, because Mother Nature, the creator, created a system where Mother Nature's just fine without us as people. She grows grass and she grows trees, right? So if we let the leaves fall on the ground this fall, and we don't rake them up and put them in a plastic bag by the side of the road, they become the food. The leaves become the food that make incremental tree growth possible year over year. Now, how do the leaves become food? It's because there are organisms in the soil that have the exact same needs that the cows do, or that we do as people, because they have to eat their food and digest their food and excrete their food. They need air to breathe and they need water to drink. And if we all think about that, then we can all grow our lawns in a way that are safe for the planet, and we can grow really nice lawns. So a little bit more about me is, as I got fairly successful with my lawn care business, I actually got more and more interested in writing about what I had discovered going organic. And I had a magazine called People, Places, and Plants. I had a show on HGTV with this man here, Roger Swain. He was on the Victory Garden. Some of you may remember him, for almost 20 years. And we had a wonderful time going around the country. There's Roger up in Maine. They're eating good Maine lobster fresh off the boat. I actually started an organization called the Safe Lawns Foundation. And I came to Washington, DC as an activist, trying to convince people not to use chemicals, not to use synthetic chemical fertilizers and pesticides and weed and feed on their lawns. And I wrote a book called The Organic Lawn Care Manual. And I also wrote another book called Tag, Toss, and Run, which encouraged people to get outside and play old-fashioned lawn games on the lawn. And what we were trying to do is to convince people on the left side of this drawing right here to behave more like the people on the right side of the drawing and understand the poop loop of life. And whether or not you have dairy cows, it does matter to you, because you can have a beautiful, lush landscape, as you see here on the right-hand side, by understanding that the soil is alive. And those organisms in the soil, the earthworms that we can see with our own eyes, or the microscopic organisms, they're all eating and digesting and excreting. And so we can have a beautiful lawn with healthy insects and healthy children and healthy dogs and cats and healthy trees. Or we can have the lawn that some Americans grow, some Europeans grow, some Canadians grow, where you're putting out pesticides and you have to put out the sign that says, caution, warning, danger, keep off the grass. And we know after decades of doing this that those lawn chemicals are actually poisons to the trees, because they upset the systems that Mother Nature has for us already created. When you put fertilizer, chemical fertilizer on your lawn, you're disrupting Mother Nature's own systems. You're disrupting the way it was intended to be. So not only are you growing just grass instead of lots of other species, like James told us in the beginning, but you're actually poisoning the environment in the meantime. You're ignoring the soil, you're ignoring the water and what happens to all that. What we're trying to do is to get away from what I call the moron approach. Now, the moron approach is designed to sell us stuff, right? They want us to buy more fertilizer. They want us to mow more often. They want us to do more and more and more, waste more water. But the reality is, at Glenstone, where I work now, because they've taken the advice now for 11 years, we actually do less. We hardly ever turn on the sprinkler system. Now, again, I don't want to take any credit for what goes on at Glenstone, because we have a tremendous crew there of 15 or 16 people, and they're the ones actually doing all the work. And I just do lots of talking, but it really is a wonderful system. And we're going to show you a little bit about Glenstone. So this is the meadow. because when I got there, there was 16.5 acres of mown turf, and now it's down to 5 acres. And instead, we've got about 45 acres of native meadow that literally grow right up onto the building of the art gallery that we opened in 2018. Literally, the meadow goes right up onto the roof. And we have some people who come to Glenstone and look at that meadow on the roof and say, boy, can't you guys afford to mow the lawn? Why are you letting all those weeds grow? So it's a little bit about the value system. Here's another view of the meadow at a different time of the year. Look at all those beautiful flowers. And you know what loves those flowers? Insects. Insects love those flowers. And you know what loves those insects? The birds. And so Glenstone is just teeming with life now because we grow all native plants. Now, we don't have 200 plants per acre probably. And unfortunately, there's something called invasive species from other continents that are a nuisance. And we'll talk a little bit about that and weed control. But we're pretty proud of what we've created, and we think this is pretty attractive. It may not be perfect. I do want to do a brief land acknowledgement of the lands at Glenstone, what is now Glenstone. From what we understand, at least for a period of time with the Manahoac territory and the Piscataqua territory, there were probably others. Glenstone was actually the site of a Civil War encampment in 1865. And we are just today's stewards. But one of our core values is to be regenerative, sustainable and regenerative in everything we do. And that word regenerate is actually a more important word than sustainable. Somebody said to me once, if we just sustain where we are today, we're going to be like Thelma and Louise at the end of the movie. If you saw that film, they all drove off the cliff in the Cadillac, right? Saying Yahoo. We need to make things better. That's what this talk tonight is better. We all need to take our own patch of paradise, whether it's our home, whether it's our church, whether it's our municipal parks, whatever it is, our playgrounds, we need to try to make them better than they were. And you start by caring for them in the right way. So, well, am I going backward here? Let me see. Okay. So Glenstone, very quickly, we founded in 2006, originally 35 acres, now encompasses about 300. We open free to the public by appointment. Thursday through Sunday. You can go to glenstone.org, and we've been organic on our lawn maintenance since June of 2010. I'm not going to read all of this, but I do want that first statement in bold. We're a place that seamlessly integrate art, architecture, and nature. We used to say art, architecture, and landscape, but we've changed it to nature because we're not a landscape. We are an integrated ecosystem that honors nature. Okay. We also have core values. We think art is essential to life, but another core value is that we think in the long term. We are committed to preservation and sustainability in everything that we do. And we have a 25-year vision that we're going to be a leader in environmental sustainability and regenerative practices, like I already said. So thank you because you can't lead in a vacuum. So thank you for allowing me this opportunity to talk to you tonight. Now, one thing a lot of people think, well, if I go organic, if I go natural on my lawn, I'm going to be giving something up. I'm going to be giving up some appearance. A lot of people think going organic and natural on the lawn is going ugly, right? Well, I'd like to say going organic is not going ugly. Now, this is Glenstone's lawn before I got there, 2008. And you can see the monoculture there. It's only grass. It's mowed to 2 inches. You don't see any weeds. There's no dandelions. There's nothing like that. Well, here we are through the years after the transition, 2013, 2017, and 2021. So it's a pretty good looking lawn, right? Now, if you look really close, you'll see some plants that aren't grass, actually. But it's green, it's healthy, and we're really, really happy. So I think anybody who wants to come to Glenstone and check this out, please do. Now, our basis of this going organic is based on the concept of compost. It goes right back to the dairy farm with my grandmother. Now, we composted our commodore. At Glenstone, we compost our food scraps. Anybody living in an apartment, living in a home, living in a church, everybody should be composting. The act of composting is mankind's single greatest gift back to the planet. The 2 most powerful tools that we have in regenerating the planet are 2 simple acts: plant trees and create compost. If we all did just those 2 things, the world would be a better place. So think about that. If you don't understand what compost is, it's basically anything that used to be alive, either plants or animals, maybe some mined minerals in certain cases, and they are commingled and combined, and they decompose. And they decompose because of heat and water and air and microscopic organisms that live in the soil, and they biodegrade. So it's a mixture of organic substances such as dead leaves, manures. And for purposes of compost, organic means anything that used to be alive. You're going to see some products that are sold out in the marketplace, and they might use the phrase organic based. Well, that just means it might has a carbon molecule in it. It may or may not be organic. So turn the package over, look at the label, and if you can't pronounce the ingredients, I can almost guarantee it's not organic, okay? Why do we want to do this? Well, if you use Roundup, which is something I used a lot when I was a professional landscaper, I was using this stuff all the time. I didn't look like this guy. Technically, if you're a professional landscaper and you're using Roundup and you're mixing it, you have to look like this guy on the left in the moon suit, because it's really toxic stuff. And it gets into our eyes and noses and on our skin, and it causes cancer. We know that now. They sold it to us for a long time as saying it was safe, but there's nothing safe about it. Here's a Little League field in Maine. I was so angry this day. I brought my team, including my son, to this field, and somebody had just put down the weed and feed crystals that you see there in the foreground. And they didn't even mark the field. And I said, why didn't you at least put out the caution, warning, danger sign so the kids would know to stay off? And they said, well, we don't like to put those signs out there because it just freaks out the parents. There's nothing wrong with this stuff. It was a bold-faced lie. So we're seeing links between pesticides and ADHD, and this is quite sad. It hits home for me. It's just not good. Tom Kelly was the founder of a company called Lawn Dog, and he said people called all the time saying that the dogs and cats were sick after the lawn company showed up, and we would just laugh at them because they knew it couldn't prove it. There's also the environmental impact. Lawns utilize 2% of the fossil fuel consumption in this country. That's 18 gallons per every family. And a lot of people think, well, I don't use 18 gallons when I mow my lawn, but most of the fuel isn't used up in the mowing. Some of it's used up in the watering because you're pumping using all that energy to pump that water. A lot of it's used in the manufacture of the synthetic chemical fertilizer. Every 40-pound bag of weed and feed or fertilizer requires the fossil fuel equivalent of 3 gallons of gasoline just to make it. And 35% of the synthetic fertilizer hits the target plant. Where does the other 65% go? It volatilizes into the air that we breathe, or it goes into the groundwater. And a lot of people think, well, what I do on my land is my business. It doesn't impact anybody else, but that's just not true. That's not how the world works. Air moves, water moves. It goes underground and it moves, just like veins in our body. You have underground veins where water flows. So what you do on your property does matter to the planet. 2% of pesticides, and pesticides are insect killers, weed killers, fungicides. 2% of that stuff actually hits its intended target. 98% goes someplace else. If your neighbor's putting down weed and feed on a Saturday afternoon and the wind is wafting in your direction, you're getting secondhand pesticides wafting into your house. It's just tragic. And lawns consume a lot of water, as James told us. This is how it all works, right? We are all share this planet. There's only really 3 places stuff can go: into the air, the surface water, or the groundwater when we put it on a property. And it's all going to wind up getting recycled and poisoning the whole place. So you better be putting stuff down on your property that's safe and natural, organic. Here's somebody watering at noontime. So when you go and water your lawn, here's another takeaway. Water in the morning, okay? You want to water deeply once a week if you water at all. Water in the morning until you have soaked your ground 10 to 12 inches deep. And how do you know? You get a shovel out and dig down. If the soil's wet, 6, 10, 12 inches down, you're probably doing a good job. If you dig down and it's still bone dry, water some more. Because what you want to do, because plants are smart, because Mother Nature designed them that way. If the water is low, 10, 12 inches down, the roots will go down to get the water. If you water your lawn every day with an irrigation system, the roots, and the roots don't have to go down to get a drink, they won't, right? Because there's plenty of water at the surface. So why would I grow deep roots? So you want to train all of your plants, not just your grass, your trees, your vegetables. You want to water them deeply because the surface is going to dry out, but the subsurface will stay wet for a good long time. Now, here's somebody who lives on a lawn, and they're on a lake, that is, and they're very proud of this lawn. They think, wow, there's no weeds in that. Isn't that a beautiful lawn? And I was sick to my stomach when I saw this, because these people are putting down weed and feed right up to the edge of the lake. That should not be allowed. We all live in the Chesapeake Bay watershed down here. We're the interfaith partners of the Chesapeake. We should not be putting this stuff anywhere nearby. There ought to be a 100-yard buffer at a minimum. This guy right here was very proud of his lawn. And he said, it's not my fault my pond died. I said, why do you think your pond died? He said, well, the farmer up the road puts too much fertilizer on his corn. But this guy was putting down copious amounts of fertilizer on his lawn and causing all kinds of problems. Now, whoops, this slide right here is probably the most important slide in the talk, right? My grandmother would see this yard as a buffet table, because it got to be the end of April and May in Bradford, Maine, and the canning cupboard was pretty well threadbare. I still have the canning cupboard in my house here in Maryland, and she grew her own vegetables in that garden I told you about. But by the end of winter, heading into spring, there was nothing left. She would go door to door to door on Reeves Road in Bradford, Maine, and fill bushel after bushel with dug dandelion greens. And she'd come home and force feed them to me. And she'd say, they're good for what ails you, dear. And she'd talk about the big taproot. She'd say, it's got this deep taproot, goes down into the soil and pulls all them good nutrients back up to the surface. This is a woman with a 5th grade education. Well, we now know that dandelions are about the most nutritious food on the planet because they have the ability to bioaccumulate. She's right. The taproot goes down into the soil looking for nutrients, sucks them into the roots, and then we eat that, and it's so good for us. We can eat the leaves. She actually made wine out of the flowers. I thought it was bitter and nasty, but the point is 90% of what grows on our lawn that we call weeds is edible. 90% is edible. Now, if this lawn isn't the kind of lawn that you like the looks of in your front yard, there are ways to make it better, and we're gonna go there next. Now, again, the environmental impact, I already covered this, but I did want to show this slide again to reinforce this Chesapeake Bay graphic right here. 40% of the Chesapeake Bay is considered to be dead, and the poisons that we put on our lawns are a big part of that. 3.8 million acres of lawns in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Lawn is the biggest crop, more than corn, wheat, and soybeans combined. 75% of lawns are in home yards. 215 million pounds of nitrogen fertilizer is applied to the bay. So if we want to be friends of the Chesapeake Bay, we got to stop putting all that stuff down on our lawn. Now, so what we try to talk about is public and institutional policies that restrict pesticide nutrient applications as watering. We focus on the fertilizers that we talked about that are derived from natural ingredients, and anything that used to be alive can be made into compost. And we talk about mowing heights. Now, one of the things we did at Glenstone, mowing heights, another takeaway. When I got there, they were mowing at 2 inches and they were bagging every grass clipping. Very first thing we did is say, raise your mower blade from 2 inches to 4 inches, as high as the mower will go, okay? And then stop gathering the grass clippings. It's a terrible waste of energy, terrible waste of opportunity. Grass clippings are mostly water, but they also have quite a few nutrients when they biodegrade. You just leave them on the lawn, they break down within a few days, and they give your lawn back about 50% of its food that your lawn needs to regenerate itself comes from the clippings. So those two things, we want to mow at 4 inches. Tall grass plants shade the surface of the soil, and that keeps the soil from running out of water, from drying out. Also, weed seeds need light to germinate. Tall grass plants actually make it shade the surface of the soil so the weed seeds don't germinate. So tall grass plants is your best friend. So we're going to water in the morning. Remember that, right? We're going to water in the morning. We're going to put our mower blade at 4 inches, and we're going to get this right. We're also going to talk about, we're going to consider lawn alternatives, right? So the organizers want to make sure that you understand, and you heard about this from some previous talks if you were on them, about some great alternatives. But flower gardens, they promote diversity and require fewer resources. Xeriscapes, they're called drought-tolerant plants. Xeriscapes don't use much water at all. Rain gardens, those are areas that can get heavy runoff sometimes from water, but they actually promote a lot of biodiversity. They store a lot of carbon. They're great for habitat. Trees and shrubs, all of these things here, flower gardens, drought-tolerant gardens, they're all better for the planet than a whole bunch of lawn. Now, here's another shot of our native meadow that Matt Partain and some others grow at Glenstone. He's the ground superintendent. And isn't that pretty? Now, that could have been lawn. Some people think it should have been lawn, but sure not me. Now, the solution goes back to Graham and the good bugs and the bad bugs. But the scientists who study this understand that if you want to grow lawn, every plant has a place that it likes to grow on the soil spectrum. So if your lawn is mostly weeds, that's because that's what your soil wants to grow. So the key to organic lawn care, the key to organic gardening, organic trees, is understanding that the soil's in charge. Mother Nature's in charge. So we need to understand soil a little bit to get the desired result. Now, if you have mostly dandelions, that's because that's what your soil wants to grow. What are the dandelions doing? Well, the dandelions are down there mining for nutrients, most especially calcium. So if you have enough calcium in your soil, and we're going to get to this in the soil test, if you have enough calcium, then the dandelions aren't going to want to grow there. Now, they aren't going to fall over dead as soon as you put calcium on lawn. This transition takes some time, but you'll get there. So there's a relationship in soil between the chemistry, the structure, and the texture. So the chemistry is the pH. We're going to look at a soil test here in a second. We're going to look at the structure and the texture. That's how much sand, silt, or clay is in your soil, and how much organic matter. Because soil is made up of 6 components: sand, silt, clay, organic matter, which is the living portion, plus air and water. And then we're going to look at the biology, what my grandmother called the poop loop of life. Now, Elaine Ingham, who's one of the leading scientists in the world on this subject, created this slide, this topic called the soil food web. Basically says we get all of our energy from the creator and the sun. And through the magic of photosynthesis, we get plants. And then plants die and they create organic matter. These are blades of grass. These are the roots of grass. These are the leaves of trees. And that stuff, that organic matter, becomes the food that feeds everything else. In the cycle of life, otherwise known as the poop loop of life, imagine my excitement when I saw this slide at a professional lecture 20 years ago. And I'd been growing up on the farm hearing this expression from my grandmother my whole life. And there it was on a slide by Dr. Ingham. It's the same as the previous slide. Basically, the sun creates all life. We get dead organic matter, which is another word for organic fertilizer. And then the decomposers. These are mushrooms, these are bacteria, protozoa, nematodes. They all eat everything. They eat and digest and excrete. Here's a little video I want to show you of this. This is soil, healthy living soil under a microscope. See, it looks like a war zone down there. Everything's eating and digesting and excreting constantly. And that's how minerals get released. Okay, when we're excreting, when the cows excrete, we know cow manure is kind of fertilizer. I think most people still know that, even though we're quite far removed from the farm. Well, when a worm excretes, the same thing happens. When a bacteria excretes, the same thing happens. Fertilizer, minerals is created. So it's really cool. Now, this is something called a Bio Assay, and I'm not going to bore everybody with this slide for a long time, but this is just to make the point that this is a test that tells you how alive your soil is. So we can measure active biomass for bacteria, for fungal, which is mushrooms, for protozoa, for nematodes, for mycorrhizal fungi. And if our crop is grass, we can tailor our compost and our compost tea, what my grandmother used to put on her garden, we can actually tailor it perfectly for the crop that we want to grow. Now, again, homeowners don't have to get this scientific. What I'd like to tell people is you can just add compost and have a nice day. Because if you add compost, it really becomes pretty uncomplicated. But we'll talk about that a little bit more. So this is a standard soil test. It's the first soil test that we ever took at Glenstone. The date on it is 2010. And I've circled the three things I want you to look at. The organic matter is 1.6%. This is super important, folks. If you want to go organic and you really care about the appearance of your lawn, now, if you want to just mow whatever comes up, that's cool. But if you want a nice looking lawn, you want to have your organic matter at least 5%. So to raise it from 1.6 to 5%, we added compost. We just top dressed the compost on the lawn, a 1/4 inch thick layer across the whole thing. And we did that twice a year for 4 years until we got our organic matter up to where it needed to be. Now, if you're starting from scratch, that's the opportune time to add a lot of compost all at once, and then you can get that organic matter up to where it needs to be. Ideally, you want it 5 to 8%. Now, you're going to see down in the bottom below that, Mg and Ca. That's magnesium and calcium. The calcium to magnesium ratio ought to be about 7 to 1. If you have 7 times more calcium than you do magnesium, grass is going to love that. Grass is going to thrive, but dandelions aren't going to like it. And most other weeds, in fact, aren't going to like it. So you're going to have pretty close to a weed-free lawn if you can get that calcium. How do we do that? Well, adding calcium, the best is you can, through wood ash, through limestone, and through gypsum. Those are your 3 sources. But if you're really trying to get a lot of calcium down, I recommend either gypsum or high calcium limestone. Don't use magnesium-based limestone. Use calcium-based limestone. So that's another important takeaway. On the far right of the soil test, you'll see something called CEC. That's short for cation exchange capacity. Cation exchange capacity. What is the magnetic, another word to say that is, what is the magnetic power of your soil to hold on to water and nutrients? A low CEC value of below 10 means that your soil can't hold on to much. So everything you put on that soil is going to leach right through really quickly. What we want is a calcium to magnesium ratio, cation exchange capacity that's 10 to 25. You want a lot of magnetic capacity in your soil. How do you increase the cation exchange capacity? Add compost. That's the good news. Add compost. Okay, so here's another soil test that was taken a few years later. On the left, you see the organic matter 6.4%. You see our cation exchange capacity is at 9.9, and our calcium to magnesium ratio is a little better. So these things do take time. They don't happen overnight. But again, if you start adding compost, you start getting an organic matter up there, you can have a nice looking lawn, especially if you mow it and water it the right way. Some of it, like none of this stuff is all that complicated. So to review, again, organic matter, cation exchange capacity, calcium to magnesium ratio. There's a help sheet on the website for Interfaith Partners, I believe. Aunt Jody, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that's on there, and explains this in a little bit more detail. And I'm here for questions, and I will be. Now, compost tea, what my grandmother put on the garden, you can do this at home in a 5-gallon drywall bucket. Okay, if you have some of your old grandmother's nylons around, that works perfectly fine for a bag. Whatever kind of mesh bag you have, put a couple of pounds of compost into the bucket. And ideally, you have an electric motor. You might have an aquarium motor up in the attic from when your children had to have that aquarium. Well, take that electric motor out or go buy an inexpensive one at the local hardware store and circulate the air. My grandmother didn't do that. So at the end, her was a very limited system. So it took 7 to 10 days by actually adding air. That's what that green thing there is in the bucket. That's an air motor. By circulating the air through the water, the compost tea will actually brew much, much faster. So instead of 7 to 10 days, you'll actually have compost tea that you can use in a day or a day and a half. Now, if you don't use the air and you just throw the compost in the bucket and leave it and walk away, you're actually going to start to generate alcohols and acids. And it'll actually be a very effective weed killer. You can dump it on the neighbor's lawn that you don't like very much, but we won't do that, right? So you can make your own compost tea, and there's lots of resources. I throw this slide in only because a lot of people think going organic's going ugly. Jeff Carlson runs the Vineyard Club on Martha's Vineyard. The people in Martha's Vineyard didn't want a third golf course because they have a single source aquifer, and golf courses have a really bad reputation for poisoning the environment. But Jeff Carlson came along and said, we can do this organically. And he and I have done lots and lots of talks together. He creates championship caliber grass with just these techniques that I'm talking about here. So this can be done. Don't let anybody tell you that organics doesn't work, because what they're really telling you is they just don't know how to do it. So here's the top dressing of the compost that I talked about at Glenstone. So that's a 1/4 inch layer. If it gets a little too thick, I'll say more than a 1/2 inch, you want to get out your rake and spread it around more, because you can suffocate the lawn by putting too much compost down. So you want to be careful on that. This is for an existing lawn. If you're renovating your lawn and you have a chance to rototill it down into a greater depth or fork it down in, that's better. But that lawn right there, we also, what we do before we put compost down at Glenstone is we rent an aerating machine. Now, an aerating machine cuts cores of soil into the ground and pulls the cores out, puts them on the surface. You can see the machine working there on the right-hand side. And then we go ahead and we put down our compost, because the compost will fill in those holes and get down to the roots of the grass where it's most needed. And the water can get into those holes, the fertilizer, anything else you add. Now, here's our Compost Tea Brewing. This was the original one on the left, and the new fancy ones on the right. These are the ones that we use at Glenstone. These are 250-gallon tanks. I put this slide in there for any municipalities that might be watching. You can do this on an industrial scale. What you're going for is about 50 gallons per acre. Okay, so if you have a 1/4 acre lawn, you can do the math pretty easily, right? And put down 12.5 gallons. So that's where if you have a 5-gallon drywall bucket and you're brewing your own and you've got a pretty small lawn, you can do this yourself. But if you're a municipality or a church or anything like that and you want to do this, it's clean, it doesn't smell bad, and I'd be happy to show you more depth and detail. Here's some folks at Glenstone spraying compost on the plants, just like my grandmother did, right? Good bugs and bad bugs. So here's Mr. Rick Boger, been at the Glenstone 20 years, and he's putting compost tea out on the lawn. Here he is putting out dead organic matter, otherwise known as lawn fertilizer. This particular brand of lawn fertilizer is made by the Land O'Lakes Purina Mills Company. They discovered about 15 years ago, I was a consultant for them. They discovered that they could make lawn fertilizer out of the exact same ingredients that they were feeding to animals. And they thought that was profound. I said, no, it makes sense, doesn't it? Because the soil's full of little tiny animals, microscopic animals, and they eat the same thing that the big animals do. So this is just grain that you're basically animal grain that you're putting on the lawn. Now, we don't even do this much anymore. Now that we've got the lawn really kickstarted, we might feed it once a year. Some years we don't feed it at all because we let clover grow. We let clover grow. Another major tip here. Clover was included in all lawn seed mixes in the United States till about 1975. Clover is a legume. Mother Nature, the creator, engineered this so that certain plants could grab atmospheric nitrogen. The air is 78% nitrogen. Nitrogen is the key ingredient in photosynthesis. How does that work, right? Most plants can't get to that nitrogen, but some of them can, and clover's one of them. It's a legume. So peas can get this, beans, vetch, but clover is the key one in lawns, because when you go organic, clover is your friend, clover is your partner. Letting 5 to 10% clover grow on your lawn is going to give you all the nitrogen that you need because it's constantly grabbing atmospheric nitrogen and storing it in its roots. Clover also happens to be drought tolerant and slow growing, and it's an excellent source for pollinating the bees You might have heard the bees are in trouble, and we need to give them all the plants we possibly can. I want you to know that the University of Maryland did a 3-year study at Glenstone showing organics versus chemicals side by side. This is the original research plot at Glenstone that was replicated at Paint Branch, right at the campus in Maryland. At the end of 3 years, we used to bring people over to look at this plot, and they'd say, I don't see any difference between the organics and the chemicals. And I said, exactly. It was kind of a letdown for some people. It's like, no, actually, that's what the study showed. There's no statistical difference in the appearance between an organic lawn and a chemically treated lawn, and we have the proof. Now, you can do this in your flowers. This is this flowering sculpture by Jeff Koons at Glenstone with 25,000 flowering plants. And these are, that sculpture right there by Jeff Koons is basically 240 stainless steel boxes all bolted together, filled with organic potting soil. And you can grow flowers, you can grow anything under the sun using these techniques. So I hope you'll come check this out. We decided, like I said, to grow with the native meadows because we wanted to invite the insects, which we knew would invite the birds. And then and other things that eat the birds also show up. We've got lots of fox and turkeys, and there's eating and digesting and excreting going on out there all the time. But we planted blends of native grasses and sedges, frequent mowing the first time in 3 to 4 times a year. A lot of people think I'm going to get rid of my lawn and I'm going to throw a meadow down. I want you to know that it's a fallacy to think that you're going to just throw it down and be done with it. You know, the first year you're going to probably mow it 3 or 4 times, and you're going to need to do ongoing weed control to combat invasives until your meadow gets established. That's its own hour-long talk, how to do that. But we've already seen a significant return of insects and birds. Why native plants are generally important is because of that coevolution. You know, we all came onto this planet. I mean, Mother Nature evolved, the planet has evolved over time, and we all depend on each other. So the trees and the birds depend on each other, the bees and the fruits and the trees and the squirrels, and we are only as strong as the weakest link. So when we put lawn fertilizer down, chemical fertilizer down, and it's killing the bacteria and the fungi and the protozoa, we might not think about it. We might not think that matters. But in fact, when that happens, you've taken away nature's own ability to sustain itself and to support us. So I love this quote, excuse me, Kay Charter, she's the founder of an organization called Saving Birds Through Habitat. Native plants are essential as virtually the only host for many native insects. Insects are essential food for many birds, particularly nesting songbirds. A small yard, even the heart of a city, can provide these crucial sites. So we encourage everybody to do their part by planting trees, by creating compost, by growing meadows. These are just some pictures of Glenstone. This is one of our sculptures, Contour 290, and you see people literally walking right through the meadow, and people come to Glenstone and they've never seen that many insects in their whole life. In fact, some people from this city are kind of freaked out by it. And I frankly kind of chuckle to myself. So more shots. Now, I'm going to the recap, and then we're going to open it up to questions because I think I'm right at 45 minutes. But obtain a soil test. I've covered that, right? Think of your soil as alive, eating, digesting, excreting in the poop loop of life. Grow the right grass. Certain grasses like full sun, certain grasses can tolerate some shade. If you don't have at least 3 or 4 hours of full sun, grow a different plant than grass. Water well, that means watering deeply once a week. Mowing properly means sharpening the blade on your mower every 10 to 12 hours of use and mowing it at 3.5 to 4 inches high. Avoid synthetic materials, it's just plain bad. Add compost. See weeds as messenger, sent by Mother Nature to tell you something about the soil below. Similarly, see insects as messengers. Insects prey on weak plants. If you have healthy, robust plants grown by compost and Mother Nature, you might get some insects, but they're not going to do economic damage. But if your plants are weak because they're thriving on chemicals and poisons, they're going to struggle forever. And then overseed regularly. Last pointer of the talk before questions. We don't let grass go to seed in a lawn environment. Now, my grandfather back on the farm, take you back to Bradford, Maine one last time. In August, he used to let his lawn go to seed. And my grandmother didn't like this very much, but my grandfather knew something, is that if you don't let it go to seed, it's not going to regenerate itself. So he let it go and they let it grow 2 or 3 weeks until it put out seed heads. Then you mow it, and those seed heads can sprout and regenerate itself. Well, if you don't want to let your lawn go to seed, you can go out and buy a bag of grass seed and you can overseed. So in the spring and the fall, Glenstone overseeds, especially any thin or bare areas. If you kind of hope you have a thin bare area on your lawn, when you look it up tomorrow morning, you look around, say there's a bare patch over there, I sure hope grass fills in. Let me tell you folks, it's not going to, because it doesn't work that way. You need to help it. A lawn is not a natural system. And the root, those lawn, it's going to fill in with weeds, not grass. And that's not what you want. I know. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to open it up to questions. And thank you for your patience. And I hope everybody got something out of that. A lot of information for 45 minutes or so.
No, it was incredible, Paul. And we have been furiously scribbling down all the questions that people, we have about 2 pages of questions. So we're going to do our best to try to get through this.
Okay.
And I see some are still coming into me, and I would just maybe ask folks to send your questions to Natalie or Matt perhaps. And I will try to get that last one that came in. So there were some questions about, is it being recorded? Yes, for the Facebook Live attendees. If you go to and maybe Katie can stick this link into the Facebook Live registration or comment, just the lawn care registration page. If you're registered for the event, you will get the recording. And if you're here on Zoom, of course, tonight, you'll get a recording in a couple days. Some people were asking if you'd be willing to share your slides, Paul. How do you feel about that? I
can probably share most of them. I may not be able to share the ones with art from Glenstone, but any of the pertinent lawn slides I can share.
So if you could just send me a PDF of what you're comfortable sharing, as soon as I get that, we'll send that out to everybody that's registered for the event.
Okay.
So moving into some questions about soil testing, some questions around what are some good places to get your soil tested at? How much does it cost? Let's start, and then let's start with those. There's several soil testing questions.
So unfortunately, the University of Maryland discontinued soil testing, so you can send it to most of the state cooperative extension services in America through the state universities do have soil testing capability. The University of Delaware has a really excellent soil lab, and I think it's $12. You can get commercial labs. We use one called A&L Laboratory, and that's, I think, $20. So it's not terribly expensive. You want to dig down to at least 4 inches deep. Don't stay right near the surface, because what will happen is you'll typically have a fairly thin layer of quite a bit of organic matter. But then right below that, you might not have as much. So make sure that you get down. And if you have a bunch of different spots on your lawn that look kind of the same, have the same kind of plants growing there, you can commingle those soil samples. But if you have an area of your lawn that looks substantially different than a different one, you may want to get a separate soil test for that, because there may be something going on there. It may not have enough organic matter. It may be more clay, or it may be nothing related to the soil at all. It could be that it's not getting as much sun. My father, if he's listening, I can pick on him, but every year he would be very happy in the springtime. He put grass seed down underneath the maple tree, and the grass seed would come up and it would be green, and he'd be very happy. And then by July, that grass didn't look very good. Why? Because the leaves grew on the maple tree and the grass wasn't getting any sunlight anymore, and therefore the grass was failing. So, you can't get grass everywhere, because grass needs, like I said, 4 hours of sunlight at a minimum to do well.
Great. And then some other questions. Can you talk about the best pH of soil, and what are some good pH?
I'm sorry that I forgot to say that out loud, but yeah, we're on a lawn environment, we're going for 6.5 to 7 on your pH. Down here, because I've seen you can go to 7.2, I wouldn't want to go much higher than that. If you have, and I didn't put this in the slide because you don't typically have this situation, but sometimes if you have a soil pH that's greater than 7.2, you want to probably put some sulfur down on your lawn. You can get that at a farm supply store typically. So I've seen more low pHs than high pHs, but I have seen high pHs.
Okay, great. And there is an activity kit we're going to be sharing shortly. In fact, Natalie, if you want to stick that in, or somebody wants to stick the link to the activity kit in the chat box right now, there is a lot more detail on the soil test. So let's move on because there's several questions here. There was a question, how does one deal with homeowners covenants that require you to keep your manicured lawn of only grass? And actually the state of Maryland just passed legislation that will be enacted either 2022 or 2023 that bans HOAs from imposing those restrictions. We're going to talk about that briefly. So so that shouldn't be an issue in Maryland. If you're not in Maryland, you know, I would just recommend reach out to your elected officials, the people that you put in office at the local and the state level, and raise your concerns and keep raising your concerns until they begin to listen to you. Paul, the clippings left on the lawns in Leisure World tend to kill and brown the grass. How do we address leaving your lawn clippings on the grass?
Okay, so if you're getting so many clippings that it's actually browning out the lawn, that probably means they're waiting too long between mowings. Basically, the rule of mowing, which I could have mentioned earlier, is you never want to cut more than 1/3 of the grass plant on any one mowing. So if your grass is 6 inches tall, the lowest you want to mow it is 4 inches. If you mow it to 3 inches or 2 inches, the lawn is going to brown out. And you're also going to have really thick, heavy clippings. The other thing you can do is use a mulching blade. A mulching blade has a little curve to it. It's an S, and it'll chop it up more finely. But again, if there's so many clippings that it's browning them out, you're going to probably want to rake some of those up so it doesn't happen. But then you're going to want to talk to your landscape professional about the fact that they probably need to be mowing more often and using a mulching blade.
Okay, and I don't know the context of this, so I'm sorry if it doesn't, if it's confusing to you, but do you consider Fiesta and Phenolson truly organic?
Yeah, they are. So Fiesta is it's an iron-based weed killer. It's a selective herbicide, meaning that it will allow the grass to grow and it'll kill the dicots. And it is made from chelated iron, and it is considered natural. Iron is, has, just because something is organic doesn't mean it's always safe. Organic products also have warning labels on them in certain cases. So you want to be careful, especially around bodies of water. And anytime cats, dogs, kids are out there, you want to be careful. Spinosad that's an ant killer. We use that to kill red ants, fire ants. That is a great product. I highly recommend it, Spinosad. And that is a perfectly natural product, and it's safe to use.
Great. Okay. What is recommended for weed killer on areas like brick sidewalks? Somebody said that they use something of a Dr. Kirshner brand, which states it's made from ocean saltwater, commercial strength, food grade vinegar and soap, and it was fairly successful. Do you agree? So back on the farm, I told you I was going to go back to Bradford but I'll do it again. My grandmother used to get vinegar from the store, 3% vinegar, and reduce it on the stove, which basically means she just boils it down. And so it makes it more acidic. And then she would use salt and lime juice, and she would kill her weeds. It was her own homemade weed killer. And it sounds like that brand. I'm not familiar with that brand, but there are many, many, many variations of those kinds of organic weed killers. These are non-selective products, meaning they're going to brown out everything. They're burnout kind of products. So they're going to, if you get it on your trees, it's going to turn the leaves brown. If you get it on your shrubs, it might scar the shrubs. It's typically not going to kill them, but it'll look pretty bad. And so you do want to be careful. And you can get horticultural vinegar that's a 20% vinegar. You want to be super careful. You want to wear goggles and rubber gloves, because if you get that stuff on your skin or in your eyes, you're going to cause some damage. So again, is it better than Roundup? Absolutely, but just use some common sense. Okay, so we have a couple questions about some invasives, strawberry and Bermuda grass. Any recommendations on how to deal with those?
So yeah, there's about 106, I believe, different invasive species on the Maryland list. And I think we have all of them at Glenstone. I'm surprised it's the stilt grass, wavy basket grass. There's so many different ones. First of all, get the problem while it's a small problem before it becomes a big problem. Right now is a super key time because everything has its seed heads set out. So if you see the weeds out there and they've gone to seed, pull those weeds as fast as you possibly can and pull as many of them as you possibly can, because if those seed heads are allowed to hit the soil, they're going to germinate and you're going to have more weeds next year. So it's really, you're trying to get it before it becomes a big problem. You're trying to gather up the seed. And in that case, take those plants to an industrial compost place. If you're a good composter and you can get it above 130 degrees in your compost pile, then you can compost them yourself. But don't let those weeds anywhere near the lawn, because those seeds will be a big problem. You can do some selective spraying of some product like I just told you. There's a new product out called Torched. That's Torched that we're using at Glenstone, and we're having some promise that the results have been pretty good. And that is a natural product. It's Torched. And the other thing that I found by mistake is if you have a big area and you want to deal with the weeds, some people put down clear plastic tarps. Those, I don't recommend those. Some people put down black plastic. I also don't recommend that. What I do use is a pond liner or rubber roofing underlayment. It's a flexible rubber liner, and it can be more expensive, of course, than the plastic is, but it's heavy. And when you put it out across the landscape, the weight is going to smother the plants, number one, and it's going to trap the gases from the soil right there. So basically, the soil is trying to breathe all the time. Remember, eat, digest, excrete, breathe. The soil is trying to breathe, but if you put this black tarp over it, made of rubber, it can't breathe anymore. The plants are going to die pretty quickly. And when you peel back the tarp, everything's going to be dead and brown. The key is to then plant what you do want to have growing there. Because if you don't do anything, those weeds are going to come back, right? That's just like I already said, because you haven't changed the underlying soil conditions. So what you need to do is to get some plants down there that are going to outcompete. There's a plant called fox sedge. Vulpinoides is the botanic name. Fox sedge, it's a native plant. And we have pretty good luck with it outcompeting some of the worst invasives. So do some research on plants that will outcompete the invasives and not get eaten by deer. And we'll help you with that if you'd like.
So we are, I'm going to just ask you a series of questions on composting. We are not going to get to all these questions. They keep rolling in. So I wonder, Paul, if we could give you a little bit of a list of questions that you could answer, and we could circulate that with our follow-up email.
Sure. And my email at Glenstone is paul.tukey. My daughter says it's turkey without the R. paul.tukey@glenstone.org. And if there's questions that don't get answered tonight, or the kit that we all put together, there's quite a bit of this answered in there, but I'm happy to be a resource and find the answer for, I don't know everything, but I can usually find the answers.
Well, thank you. I am going to just ask you some of these composting questions and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
There was some question about recommendations on optimal composting conditions. Matt, you can go ahead and put that. So we did a learning lab recently, and there's a recording of that learning lab, everybody. Matt's going to stick that in the chat box that might answer some of these questions. But if you had any tips for optimal composting, do you put the compost right on top of the grass? Is it okay to put it down before rain? Can you add store-bought bag compost, and or does it have to be homegrown? I'm just rattling these off really quickly. And then do you need to be worried about it? Just like you worry about other things on the grass, like lawn fertilizer, getting down into the watershed. Do you need to worry about that with composting tea?
So, okay, so there's a lot there. So very quickly, if you're talking about the lawn, the scale of a lawn, you're going to go broke if you try to do it with bagged compost. Now, one of my best friends works for a composting company and sells it by the bag. So God bless him, but top dressing in that across the lawn will get super expensive. So you're better off looking for a bulk source. There are numerous bulk sources. I'm not going to endorse any one or the other publicly right now, but there are bulk sources. Sometimes you can find farmers who have composted materials that they're willing to sell and deliver for a fee. And that's what we do at Glenstone. We make our own compost, but we get about 80 yards a year out of all of our food scraps and our landscape waste. And on our big campus, 80 yards is a lot, but we used to use a lot more than we do now. But there are lots of facilities around. Like I said, about a 1/4 inch thick layer is about what you're aiming for, because more than that, you can smother the grass, the existing grass. Ideally, you would put the compost in the springtime, whether you're growing a garden or get trees or the lawn. Unfortunately, it gets tougher and more expensive to do this after the lawn is already established. And so during a renovation is the time to get a lot of compost worked in. So I'm not sure I answered every question, but that's.
We have to worry about compost tea in the way we worry about fertilizers.
No, you really shouldn't. I mean, I think the one thing that some people worry about in compost is that grass clippings that have been treated with herbicides, weed killers, can be collected and composted. And the residues of those toxic chemicals in the weed and feed can wind up in the residue of the clippings and the residue of the compost. And sometimes it can be at problematic levels. So here's a quick tip. Before you buy a whole bunch of compost, ask for a sample, bring it home and throw a radish seed in it, or some grass seed in it, or any quick germinating plant. And does that compost germinate seed or not? Once the seed germinates, does the plant actually grow? If the seed doesn't germinate in the compost, I would not use that compost. That would indicate to me that either A, it's not aged enough, or B, maybe it is tainted with pesticides. So that simple test, that simple at-home test is really key, especially if you're going to make a big investment in compost.
Okay. I really wish we had you for another hour. You should have your own little podcast. We will do our best.
I used to, yeah.
You used to? Okay.
I used to. Yeah.
We'll do our best to try to get the rest of these questions answered, folks. We do want to make sure we can share the activity kit, which may actually answer some of these questions. So with that, I am going to turn it back over to Bernadette.
Thanks, Jody, and thanks so much, Paul. At this point in the program, Max would like to make a call to action. We ask you to be mindful of creation care on your properties and those of your congregations, and also consider your own sphere of influence and think about how to start having the conversations you need to have to make changes happen on your property or church properties or in your neighborhood. To that end, we're sharing with you this wonderful activity kit. It was developed by IPC, Paul Tukey, and Max, and it should be in the chat already. Also, please consider joining Max Frederick County for more events like this. Our email is in the chat, and we'd also like to put our links to our Facebook page and our website. And we're going to talk about a few actions. I think it's going to go to Matt now to talk about a few examples of actions that have been taken already.
Thank you so much, Bernadette. And thank you, everybody who's spoken tonight, James, for that beautiful introduction. And thank you, Paul, for your words of wisdom. I am inspired to take action on my own lawn here. But as we had some questions come in, and as Jody mentioned, it's not just about taking action on our lawns. There's actually a lot of action we can take legislatively at the local level, state level, to do. And there's action that's already been taking place here in the state of Maryland that I think is worth highlighting and celebrating. We are lucky to live in an area around the Chesapeake Bay where we're really progressive in these actions. And just to highlight a few of these without running down the full list, in Greenbelt, Maryland, legislation has been passed for sustainable lawn care policy on public lands, which is limiting the use of pesticides. Howard County, Maryland has a very similar policy as well that has passed. Hyattsville, Maryland, as well, is banning pesticides on public property in favor of organic methods. Montgomery County, Maryland voted to ban the use of cosmetic pesticides on private lawns. Tacoma Park, Maryland is doing the same deal in banning pesticides and trying to take an organic method. Baltimore County is replaced glyphosates with more sustainable and healthier pesticides. And in Salisbury, Maryland, just this week, we had an ordinance passed that will allow the residents of the city of Salisbury to start converting some of their lawns to some of that prairie landscaping that we saw that Paul was working on at Glenstone. And the state is taking action as well. As Jody mentioned, there was a law passed this year that will make it so that HOAs can't stop homeowners from replacing lawns with native landscaping, which is just fantastic. And also a lot of work has been done at the state level to ban harmful chemicals from entering our lawns. It's harmful to wildlife, our waterways, and to insects as well. So it's not just about converting our lawns, it's also about convincing our neighbors to take this action. And also sometimes it takes some advocacy and legislation to help make the changes that we want to see. So I would encourage you to take a look at the laws that are coming before you. If your local municipality isn't one of the ones listed tonight and you're looking for ways to take action, there's opportunities there as well. So with that, I'd like to take a minute and just thank all of you for joining us tonight. We've been blown away by the interest and the enthusiasm for this event. So thank you so much for coming out. And we hope you all were inspired. We're going to wrap things up this evening with a closing reflection. Before we do, I just want to send a quick reminder that we'll be sending out an email later this week with the link to the recording from tonight, as well as the activity kit. And we'll be including the slides from the presentation as well. If you want to make sure that you receive this, please visit our Stay Connected page, which I believe Natalie will be putting into the chat again. If you sign up for that, that'll make sure that our emails are coming through and you'll be able to get a copy of this evening's recording. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Reverend Beth O'Malley, who is the chaplain of Hood College, for a closing reflection. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Reverend O'Malley.
Thank you. Instead of adding a lot of words, because we've had so many important ones that I'd like all of us just to meditate on, have a moment, I want to invite you to this time for a moment of contemplation, and we can call it prayer depending on our tradition. Whatever it is, I just invite you into this moment. A lawn can seem like a throw rug in the smallest room on this vast global home that we share. But our care for even the most infinitesimal supports the well-being of the magnificent whole. Great Creator, by all the names we know you and the many ways that we call you, may our thanksgiving for the land on which we live, the soil we share with grass and dandelions and bugs and worms and thousands of other creatures beyond our sight, may our thanksgiving begin appreciation for these blessings, and may we move beyond just that appreciation to becoming active partners. May we manage the manure. May we watch for the messages of the earth, and may we support all the natural systems on our small patch of paradise. Before we end tonight, as we breathe, as we hear these words, as the wisdom has been shared, may we each set our intention for the place that we live and care for. In that moment of silence, may we rededicate ourselves to taking care of what we have been given, what we share, and may the values that we each hold be reflected in the gifts that we give back. We ask all of these prayers in the spirit of creation and life. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. That concludes our program this evening. We will be in touch this week with some follow-up materials. Thank you and good night, everybody. We can stop the recording. All right, and if the hosts and co-hosts just want to stick around until the room is mostly empty, we are almost there. Thank you, Bonnie Raindrop. We can begin to, some people may not be sure how to leave, so the hosts and co-hosts can begin to just ask, yeah. Oh, I wanted trying to get